My Lords, HS2 Limited spent £77.8 million on consultancy in the 2025-2026. This targeted advice was used to support the fundamental reset, its scope and its cost. This is a significant undertaking in terms of complexity, pace and scale, and could not all be done in-house. Under new leadership, HS2 Limited is being transformed into a simplified, more cost-effective company with more than 300 back-office roles already removed and an absolute focus on delivery.
My Lord, I'm grateful to my noble friend's response, and first of all I'd like to express my condolences to the family of the train driver who died in the accident last Friday, and also, of course, to the relatives of those who were injured. I'm not going to say any more about that because that's for another day. I'm grateful to my noble friend for his answer, but my figure of how much the government has spent on consultants, 22 million, with a further 18 to 19 million over the next 12 months, I have to ask my noble friend, what are they doing for their money? They're on a cost-plus contract, and the design has long since been finalised, so what are they getting for their money, apart from wasting taxpayers' money?
I should say from this dispatch box that the government too is immensely sad on the events in Bedford last Friday. Our sympathies are wholly with the relatives of the deceased driver and with all of those affected by the accident. The Secretary of State for Transport is making a statement later in the other place. In respect of the spend on consultants, this consultant spend in the 25-26 financial year is for a fundamentally different purpose than any money previously spent on consultancy for HS2. The company was not in control of the contracts that it had let. It was not in control of what work had been done. The effort to find out what work had been done for the money that's spent, roughly 2/3 of the original budget has been spent and only 1/3 of the work has been done, is testimony to the way in which the project was managed. Getting control of it means finding out what was done, and that's what this money has been spent on.
We have a realistic timetable and budget to complete the works on this much delayed railway line.
The recent statement by the Secretary of State for Transport in the other place said that the work that Mark Wilde as the new Chief Executive, Mike Brown as the new Chair of the new board, the project is now expected to cost between £87.7 billion and £102.7 billion. The first trains are now expected to run between Old Oak Common and Birmingham Curzon Street sometime between May 2036 and October 2039, and the full scheme, including Euston Station and a connection to the West Coast Main Line at Handsacre Junction, is expected to open between May 2040 and December 2043.
My Lord, could I invite my noble friend the Minister and everybody else in the House in 2037, and I repeat 2037, to join me on the opening of HS2 to save 30 minutes to get to Birmingham. Now, at the moment, that's cost us, you've heard from my noble friend the Minister, 102 billion. To cancel it will be 58 billion. And if, to save further money, they're reducing the top speed by 25 miles an hour. Frankly, you couldn't make this up. And it seems to me that the potential saving of some 50 billion could be better spent, not least on a few submarines. So can I invite my noble friend the Minister to think very seriously about cancelling this white elephant?
Right. My noble friend has come in to this long-running play, certainly hopefully after the intermission and certainly after the first act. The point of HS2, you could say it's badly named. The point of the scheme is to produce a serial improvement in train capacity between London, the West Midlands, the north of England and Scotland. And that's the purpose of the scheme, and the result of the scheme will be far more capacity both on the new line and released on the old line in places like Milton Keynes and so forth. to allow the economy of Britain outside London to have its full potential in Birmingham, the north of England, and stretching as far as Scotland. It isn't just a high-speed line. You can't judge the value of the expenditure merely on the elapsed journey time, though it is handy that the line is faster. And having started it in whatever position it's in, and we inherited it in a very bad position, the best thing to do is to finish it.
Most of my life living in the north of England, I strongly agree with the Minister's point that we do need to improve very considerably the capacity of railway lines to the whole of the north of England, northwest, Yorkshire and northeast. That clearly justifies completing the line and completing it to Yorkshire as well as to Manchester. And the Minister has explained that this is an entirely exceptional circumstance in which these consultants were brought in. Can I tempt him to talk about, however, the government's use of consultants, which has expanded over the last 15 years? Does there not come a point in dealing with outsourcing contractors and public procurement when the government should perhaps be insourcing some of its capacity to examine what outside contractors provide and not always outsource it, or so often outsource it, to consultants who charge a good deal more than civil servants do?
I certainly thank the noble Lord for his clarity about the purpose of HS2. I'm not the best person to stand here to talk about consultancy expenditure in government in general, but what I would say is this. I do sympathise with him about getting long-term work done, because the cheapest way of getting long-term work done is to employ people to do it on an employment basis. But if you look at what has had to be done by Mark Wilde and under the supervision of Mike Brown and the new board, you'll see that actually a company that doesn't know how it spent its own money and doesn't know what work was done for it in circumstances where they're currently cost-plus contracts is in need of serious help. And that serious help, frankly, can only be established in the short term with the use of consultants.
My Lords, may I, on behalf of these benches, also express my condolences to those who lost their lives in this tragedy on Friday. Happily, a very rare event on Britain's railways. My Lords, in relation to HS2, one of HS2's principal contractors has warned that the government's steel tariffs are ill-timed, unhelpful, and will exacerbate existing challenges facing HS2. Why has the government chosen to make HS2 even more expensive by putting these tariffs on imported steel?
Well, fortunately, nearly all of the steel for HS2 has already been purchased. So, although it suffers from many things, it will not suffer from changes in steel prices going forward. And indeed, if the noble Lord was to look either on social media or at pictures, or even go and see, he'll see that a vast amount of steel has already been erected on the route to Birmingham.
Given the purpose of HS2, why was the section HS2A running to Crewe cancelled? A very short section, some 30 miles or so. It would have provided a very valuable link to the West Coast line. Why was it cancelled?
Well, I think the noble Lord needs to look at the benches across from me, because as phase 2A of HS2, which would have run from Handsacre to Crewe and then on to Manchester, was cancelled peremptorily by one of the previous Conservative Prime Ministers at virtually no notice and without some of the consequences being either foreseen beforehand or indeed requested afterwards. This government is keeping the land that had been that land which had been already purchased, and is thinking carefully about what needs to be done north of Birmingham to Crewe and to Manchester. Conservative.
If I can, my Lords, if I can first and foremost say to the Minister, as somebody who regularly uses that railway line from St Pancras to Derby, how everyone shares the thoughts of the government, and I'm sure the Minister will come to the House as soon as he has any interim information on what the Rail Accident Investigation Branch reveal. As far as HS2 is concerned, he is absolutely right to say it is more about capacity than speed. That has always been the case. However, there is no doubt there are huge amounts of lessons to be learned as a result of some of the things that have gone terribly wrong as far as some of these contracts are done. And bearing in mind the reports in the Times last week about how much more infrastructure costs are in this country than the rest of Europe, will the government be looking at that report in detail and see what lessons can be learned?
I have the greatest respect for the noble Lord and his knowledge, and I know that he travels regularly on the middle of the main line, so I am sure that I'll be standing here as soon as there's something, so there's some concrete facts on the accident. He's right. The reports suggest that we're not certainly very cheap at major projects. The thing I would say to him, which I hope he's familiar with anyway, is that we can do projects of large sizes. The Transpennine route upgrade, which nobody talks about, which is at least 13 to 14 billion, and is in hand now on a railway that's operating every day, is on time and budget. And actually, it is worth reflecting that claims that this country can no longer do these things are not correct. We can do them, but they need to be thought about, they need to be planned properly. You don't start the job until you know what you're buying, and then they need to be managed cleverly by people who know what they're doing with a partnership with the contractors. And the result is that we will show that we can do a big project on the railway in the north of England.